So can they? Is it still just us? So can they install the Visio remotely?
Yes. I'm going to start the recording, so I've just started it. We'll talk after.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, Mike Saluski, joined the call.
Hi, this is John.
Hey, Mike, this is Andrew.
Hi, this is Penny.
Hi, Penny. I see everyone is signing in. We'll give them a few more minutes. I am sharing the screen, but right now it's just basically the meeting agenda and a list of the participants as they come in.
Sounds good.
How'd the session this morning go, Penny? Did the users like the Confluence training?
Yeah, I think it was really helpful. Kind of gave us that start to get in there and start to play around a bit and learn more as we go. And the exercise was really helpful too. I mean, it gives you just a different feel when you're actually in there working in it. So good, really good. Thank you.
Sure. And we can have a follow-up per the emails.
Terrific.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you very much for doing that for us.
Oh, you're quite welcome, Mike.
I want to go through the one of the do's and don'ts. Sorry, part of it with Confluence was we brought in a number of communication and collaboration tools, and we turn them on and let people go. So then it's like, hey, can't find anything.
Well, with a little bit of governance and best practices, any of the tools are actually pretty good, but Confluence is a more basic tool and it's easier to use overall. So we find its acceptance rather high once we set up a good process for it. So, and like I said, if you need a one-on-one real quick, be more than glad to do that.
Thank you.
I see people are joining us. This is our Sales Operations and Salesforce CX Data Strategy meeting. We'll give everybody a few more minutes to call in. I am sharing my screen, but right now I just have the welcome page. This is Joe Speak. I'm hosting the call along with Penny. So I'm going to go through and call out the people I have so far. So I have Andrew, Adam, John Lee, Michael from the Capgemini side, and myself, Joe Spica. And then from Gore, I see Penny, Colleen, Mike. Did I miss anybody else on the Gore side that might be on the call that I can't see a name for? Okay. We'll give everybody a few more minutes waiting for Jenny, Cheryl, Sean. So Penny, from the Gore side, do we really have enough people to go forward without, Jenny and Cheryl and Sean? Check the.
I would say no.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Right, and I can't see their acceptance on my side, but I'm assuming that they accepted, right?
Let me double check.
Sure. Hi, this is Joe Spica. I'm hosting the call. Did someone else just recently join? Oh, I see you, Jen.
Yeah, Jenny did decline. I know she's in an aerospace meeting today, so that probably keeps her. Oh, and Cheryl declined as well. So let's check on Sean. Sean was tentative, so let's go ahead and get started then.
Okay.
Hey, Penny, this is Jen. I'm sorry I'm late.
Jen, we're just starting, so you're right on time.
Great.
Hi, this is Joe Spica. I'm chairing the meeting. Penny and I are the project managers on the team. This is the Sales Operation and Salesforce CX Data Strategy Project Interviews. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew, who is on the Capgemini side, and to Jen as well. Thank you.
Awesome. So I'm happy to jump in here. I guess I just want to validate, Jen, with you, as well as with Colleen, if this makes sense, given that we're missing 3 out of the 4 participants, to have this call, or if we should try to reschedule for a time when we can get the broader audience. Because I think what we have found on a lot of these calls is that, the different participants from the same groups have been able to kind of feed off of each other and make the conversations really comprehensive for us. So, Jen, I guess what's your take, and Colleen as well?
Hi, Colleen.
Hi, Jen.
I would say if we can get, maybe we don't need the full hour because we don't have everyone, but I'd be interested in getting Colleen's take. I think she's gonna definitely be more in the day-to-day with Salesforce now, and has been talking with different business lines. Since we're all on the phone already, I'd like to take advantage of that, and then maybe
Sure.
we could try to give her a little bit of time back if we can get through the questions quickly.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So, hi, Colleen. So I'll just run through kind of at a high level.
Cheryl's reaching out to me right now. Do you guys want me to see if she can join?
Sure.
All right, hold on. Oh, she's saying she can't. She's running right out. Hold on. Okay, it's just us. Let's go.
Okay, all right, no problem. So just to give you the quick overview, because I know everybody's gotten a different exposure in terms of being able to prepare for these calls. So we're looking at customer data, but we're looking at it specifically within the scope of sales and marketing. So we're really trying to understand how sales and marketing and service and future state e-commerce experiences have unique needs around customer data relative to the rest of the enterprise. We're trying to look at that really from an experience-focused lens, so understanding how we provide a solid foundation for e-commerce or marketing automation or better support for field sales in the future. And I think in doing so, we're moving the conversation a little bit from what I understand has been the historical focus, which is around accounts, and trying to also include those customer stakeholders or the contacts within the accounts as we're really digging into this. So in doing so, we're talking to a really large number of people from across sales operations, marketing, digital, IT, data management, and analytics to really try to get an understanding of both where current pain points may exist, but also where kind of that aspirational future state lives for everybody. So, as I said, I'm Andrew from Capgemini. I'm our engagement manager across a lot of our CX work. We've got a number of our data experts on the phone listening in. And do you mind just giving us a quick intro? Because I don't know that we've had a chance to meet before.
Sure. So really quick, I just want to make sure. I did see a calendar entry on someone's desktop. Right now, no one is presenting, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Just wanted to make sure something didn't happen, because then it was asking me to download something. My name's Colleen Morrissey. I've been with Gore for over 17 years, primarily with EPD, and then when we merged to become PSD. I started in field sales, and I went into inside sales, and then went into leadership with our sales ops team. And I'm currently the PSD divisional systems and tools champ. So I work with the Enterprise Center of Excellence and representing PSD and their businesses for what we need the system to do for them to make their day in the life easier.
Got it. And is that system specifically Salesforce?
So pretty much, yes. My title is systems and tools, but it is a very high, almost all focused on Salesforce and systems that integrate with Salesforce.
Great. Okay. That's really helpful. So actually one place that would be fantastic to start, because I think inevitably we'll end up spending a fair amount of time on Salesforce itself, would just be to understand when we talk about systems that integrate into Salesforce, what that means for PSD. What are some of those systems that we should be aware of?
Hey,
okay.
Colleen.
Yep.
Hi, it's Mike Zalewski.
Hi, Mike.
I completely agree with what you said, and I think there's also when you're saying systems, like a lot of Excel files that you have people and your team has to integrate with, or they do work in, I don't know that they're system integrations. Would you be able to talk to any of those to help the Capgemini folks?
I think. So, we gather data from Salesforce and do a lot of exporting out of Salesforce to manipulate and things of that nature. There's times where we are also having to enter or a ticket to import contact data into Salesforce. Most of it's from a reporting and analytics side, kind of diving deeper into the reporting, but I did hear recently of a use case that we have a sales team that lives out of their email because that's what they're used to doing, and managing their contacts from an email and wanting to make sure that we can get that into Salesforce and not lose that from Lotus Notes. Is that what you're talking about specifically, Mike, or?
Go ahead, Andrew.
Well, so this is actually, you've described a process that sounds similar to what we've heard on a few different calls in terms of having situations where you're exporting data into an Excel workbook, you're sending those Excel workbooks around, getting people either to add data, to clean data, to change it in some way, shape, or form. Can you talk a little bit about maybe why that's a common practice and why people aren't either willing or able to just make those changes to the contacts directly in Salesforce?
So I think some of them is just sheer not knowing what would be duplicate and what isn't, and not wanting to go through and take the time. So where an upload they're hoping would be able to address duplicate information. I think there's been, if I'm completely honest, there has been a hesitancy of interacting with Salesforce and a misunderstanding on how to deal with list views. I actually participated the past 2 days in the aerospace market-facing meeting, and the level of willingness to interact with the system is quite a spectrum. So I just think, we have a good mix of an aged sales force versus, newer associates coming in that have dealt with other systems with a willingness to kind of poke around and play. And then there's some that their comfort is just not there. And I think they had, at first when we rolled out Salesforce, they had a very hard time finding anything. So they kind of just gave up and started doing things externally that made sense to them.
Got it. Okay. And just, I don't know that we've ever actually asked this question, but do you guys have, the Salesforce mobile app activated and have a user base that is able to at least make some of these changes in the field?
So funny you should say that. Part of my presentation yesterday was showing them a physical count of single sign-ons on mobile versus desktop. And our desktop is in the multiple thousands, so like 8,000, where in 1 month we had like 8,000 single sign-ons on a desktop, and we had 61 single sign-ons on a Salesforce One app. I am slightly skeptical of that data, and the only reason is I feel like I alone could be the 61, and I know I'm not the only one into it. Because if you think about single sign-on, it's every time you freeze out of your mobile app fairly quickly. And every time you go back in, you have to do your PIN code and go back in. So I felt 61 was just so significantly low. And a couple of the field sales who acknowledged that they don't go in there frequently was like, I at least do it 3 times a day, So it did seem skewed, but I mean, the numbers were so substantially different. They were so off.
So I'll just say anecdotally that we were Salesforce users as well, and the kind of the cobbler's son example that our Salesforce instance probably needs quite a bit of love and feeding itself. But even with all of those challenges, I feel like I basically live in the mobile app. So it's amazing for me to hear that, because I just don't know how we would actually interact with Salesforce given how often we're not at our desks.
Yep.
Without it, and I imagine that that's similar with a lot of the field sales folks who probably don't spend very much time in front of their computer. Is that a fair assessment?
Not as much in PSD. I think in MPD perspective, they're more mobile than PSD is. Okay. I also think that part of that is a willingness to change behavior. I think PSD should be, and that was one of the questions I posed to them at the end, is I want to hear why they're not mobile. I want to hear, one of the driving decisions why we chose Salesforce is because it's mobile. And we can log a call right then and there. I must have showed 30 people yesterday how to log a call from their Salesforce One app and how to not even type it, just to hit the microphone and speak their notes. When I tell you that was earth-shattering information to them, I wish I was exaggerating. And I was just as shocked of how much of a news that was for them. When we rolled out Salesforce in PSD was the first division to go on Salesforce, and the Salesforce One app was not emphasized. It was mentioned. We said you have it, and this is how you upload it, but it was not emphasized and it was not trained to. And I think that is the biggest piece of that's the biggest problem. Did I lose everyone?
Nope, still here.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. That was
That's okay.
A little strange. My phone just cut out. It didn't beep or anything, so I kept talking. So that's helpful in understanding, I think, some of the context around kind of the Salesforce adoption and why some of the spreadsheet processes exist. You also noted that there's a group of sales reps that are basically living out of their email. Is that widespread, or is that relatively constrained?
I think it's pretty widespread. I mean, from a sales operations perspective, their day in the life is actioning off of opportunities. And so they are more living in Salesforce than others. I think some of the functionality that we have not rolled out in Salesforce has enabled the email solution to be a solution. So for instance, we have product specialists and applications engineers that are customer facing that have access to Salesforce, and they can get the opportunities and have their line of sight. But the problem is that we can't share drawings in Salesforce, and their bread and butter is getting the drawings, doing red lines to those drawings, sharing them internally with whoever needs to see them, and respond back with a quote or an RFQ to an RFQ. And we have said that Salesforce is not a document repository, and it is not a safe place because of the collaboration to put any drawings, especially those that would have restrictions like government restrictions and things of that nature on them. So we're saying do everything in Salesforce, but we're having a very large piece of their everyday not allowed to go in the system because we don't have the security that's needed to be able to allow them to do it within the system. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it completely does. And reminds me a little bit, Jen, of some of the conversations that we were having around DAM. Not that it's a one-to-one, but just that there is some relation to kind of the pain points. So I think going back to maybe the original question, so I'm understanding better how the spreadsheets all relate in. Are there any systems that have actual integrations into Salesforce for PSD?
So it does interact with our JD Edwards at E1 system, our
Sure. Yep.
So Salesforce is where we start a customer. So that's kind of the system of record. We build them in as a prospect. They become a customer by entering an address book record into our ERP system. That address book record then comes back. That information comes back in and syncs with Salesforce. And Mike, you're probably far more knowledgeable than I on actually how it happens. But it's my understanding that once we have a center of excellence that builds the customer in our ERP, that information then syncs back to Salesforce with the address book record number and things of that nature, and they become a formal customer.
Got it. And do the sales folks actually have to make that entry in E1?
Not in E1. In Salesforce, they do. We have a Joe Central, or a center of excellence. I shouldn't say it's more than one person, but we have a center of excellence that does all the cross checks and builds the account in E1. But they take the information from Salesforce. Actually, they take the information from Salesforce. They take the information from a Lotus Notes database that that Sales Ops has to fill out, and then they integrate with E1, and then all of that stuff comes back into Salesforce.
Got it. Okay, this is now ringing a bell that Annie had walked us through a little bit.
Yeah. What was that, Jen?
Do we have the documentation around the double step with the Lotus Notes database from the last call? This is for the CAP team, or should we have Colleen walk through it?
So I think, and I can just walk through what I have in my notes briefly. I think if it's documented in more detail anywhere, we'd love to have that. But the way it was explained to us on the call with Annie is that effectively, so the sales associates are maintaining their information in Salesforce until the point where there is a sale, and then basically they're putting a manual request into the Lotus Notes database, which then goes to this group that takes those requests and manually creates the address book in E1. And then eventually there is some sort of batch job that then takes that and syncs it back over to Salesforce. Is that accurate?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole because I suspect that this one will come up in some of the Salesforce conversations, but I am curious, and Mike, maybe this is a question more for you. What's I know the response we got from the previous group was just around data quality and duplicates, but I guess what prevents this address book creation process from being facilitated in Salesforce? Is it just there's certain data that we don't want in Salesforce, or it just feels to me like it could be an integrated process?
I think the process could be much more integrated. I think part of what happens is our ERP structure has a certain set of requirements for what a customer record would need to hold.
Yeah, every time I've asked that question, I've been told that there's far more data in the E1, than what we build into Salesforce.
Correct, and that requires right now our process is a human review process. So assigning a credit manager to it, assigning terms, assigning credit terms, assigning a credit limit, having somebody review that. Putting in that structure of, is there a parent, is there a payable that's separate, the ERP has 5 associated addresses you can put for a given record. Then it would go through and say, well, am I a bill to, am I a ship to, am I both? And all of that.
So really just so much more than you would want in Salesforce that it's not maybe sensible to build all of that out in Salesforce just for the purposes of automating.
Correct.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
And I think the other one is that, again, we have requirements internally where if the way Gore is structured, if you have a different, we're built in by companies, and companies could be across different geographic regions. If you're across a geographic region, there's tax reporting regions that require a different address book record to be built. So in some cases, well, I need to know where it is you want this to be built so that I can build the ERP record. So it would start to go, I could have somebody in the States saying, well, I need a record built for me, but it's for Germany. Someone has to go and say, oh, but is the transaction going to take place out of the States, or is the transaction going to take place out of Germany? Then somebody has to go and say, well, now I know which business unit of Gore to sign to get to a company to get to financial reporting so that everything's legal.
Yeah, so my personal opinion, and mine is not as informed as Mike's, because I am not the subject matter expert when it comes to E1. But my personal opinion is I feel that even just maybe not eliminating the E1 side of it, but eliminating the Lotus Notes database portion of getting that request in there, I would assume a workflow could be built in Salesforce.
I would agree.
Yes.
And I think it's just it's us getting smarter integrations, Capgemini team.
Yep.
Does somebody have advance notice? We're going to get an order. So in one case, I want the integration popping from Salesforce up to E1. In some cases, I got an order. Who would be able to trigger that to go and say, I've received an order, but I don't have an E1. I don't have a record to put this order against in my ERP system. Does it exist down in the Salesforce system so that I could do this? Today, that's human.
Did we lose Andrew on mute?
Yep. Sorry. I was just saying, Adam and John, this may be a good thing just as we're tagging the notes with various topics. It's something that we make sure we surface to David Fisher as he's talking with Sean and Annie about some of the future state Salesforce work, just around workflows.
Yeah, so, I think I brought this up with David.
Oh, you've already spoken with David about it. Perfect. That's great.
Yeah. The address book database in Lotus Notes is one piece that I really feel we don't need to be doing. But you're more than welcome to bring it. But I believe I have brought it up with him. But supported by the calls, that would be fine. That would be great.
Awesome. Great. So E1 definitely has been something that's come up frequently when we talk about integration into Salesforce. Does PFD have any other systems that are either receiving data from or pushing data into Salesforce as it pertains to customers?
You didn't lose me. I'm thinking. to my knowledge, really the primary interactions right now are CloudCraze web stores, which is obviously arguably part of Salesforce, and our ERP system.
Great. Can we talk a little bit about CloudCraze then?
The data warehouse and like the data lake, Mike, is that considered a separate system or?
I don't believe we're doing any integration from it. So right now it's just going to pull and have a direct feed out of Salesforce.
Correct. That's what my understanding is.
Come out of the cloud into. My understanding is the reason for creating the data lake or the data warehouse 2 was in one case we've got data in Salesforce and we want to be able to make sure we can get it if ever we have a need, a business need. And
so is that more of a risk mitigation, or is that planning for potential integration, Mike?
I took it more from a risk mitigation, was my understanding of it.
Okay. And is that, I know Malin has mentioned in the past that we have something that we need to find out a little bit more about, but that there are some data lakes that are starting to crop up within the enterprise that are utilizing MapR running on AWS. Is this
this is one of those.
That model?
Yes,
okay.
This would be one of those, yes.
Great.
And I think, again, part of it was trying to go and say, as we're doing all our financial reporting out of E1, we're doing a lot of our sales opportunity management out of Salesforce, and we even have a project now that Todd Adler was working with and communicating with you, where we're trying to go and say, how do we do sales performance reporting, either whether that's performance against opportunities, performance against forecast. So in some cases, PSD is the only group bringing orders back from the ERP system into Salesforce. Nobody else is, but everybody, the enterprise does have the need to go and say, what's your forecast? What's your performance against that forecast? And how do you want to do that? Part of that was the data warehouse 2 or the data lake was to try and say, now I'm going to have an integrated place where I can accomplish that.
Got it, but just for PSD in this case.
Yes. Well, I think everybody has that need. I don't know how the others, if you're not doing your opportunities, how you would come back and say, how do you want to judge your performance against it? What do you want to call your forecast, and what do you want to judge your performance against that forecast based on?
Yeah, so Mike, I actually just had a call with Todd and Kyle and Phil, and we were going to bring information to David about that forecasting process too, the end-to-end of that. But the reason why it is just PSD is because PSD is the only division really using opportunities as a whole. Fabrics is doing little bits of it, but that's not how they're deriving their forecast. They're still deriving their forecast externally. And then medical is not using opportunities at this point in time.
Okay. Yeah, and I definitely heard about the medical side of things from that perspective. So with regards to CloudCraze, I know that we've heard a little bit about some pilots that are going on, but I don't know that we've heard a ton of detail around exactly what's being built out outside of the fact that there are pilots and they're in PSD and they're on CloudCraze. So do you mind walking us through, I guess, kind of any insight you have into that and how, if at all, that's integrating, I'm assuming, back into Sales Cloud?
I'm sorry, can you ask that again?
Yeah, I guess there's two questions, and I probably asked it in a roundabout way. So one of the questions is just I'd like to understand where some of these early CloudCraze pilots are in their initial implementation. And then the second piece of it is just how integrated these CloudCraze experiences are going to be with Sales Cloud. So
from a venting perspective, we're through the pilot and the integration. You request that you create a CloudCraze number. The customer support associate, which is sales ops, requests that a CloudCraze customer number be built from Salesforce and goes through. Most of our customers are built in E1 anyway, but you can't interact with CloudCraze without having a customer number associated with it. So it's not just a public web store where you can go and order and get to a certain point. It requires a login, and that login requires interaction with getting a address book record and with our customer support associates. That order information, PSD does bring order information into the at the account level through the AB number and the quote number. So the CloudCraze orders are coming into Salesforce just as non-CloudCraze orders are coming into Salesforce. With regards to the another use with that CloudCraze is going through the curated commerce project. Those orders would also interface in Salesforce if they're orders directly with Gore.
Got it.
I'm coming up to speed with some of that through third-party questions, but that's my understanding. But it's obviously direct sales, not through a distributor at this point in time.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Adam, Michael, any questions in terms of digging into that a little bit more?
No, not at this time.
Okay. So one thing, and maybe this is getting a little bit deeper than where you have awareness to at this point based on your last comment, but from what you can tell, the approach that's been taken to CloudCraze so far, is this something that appears to be something that is scalable in the way that it's currently been approached, or is it something that very much is just kind of dipping a first toe into this this type of capability and really needs more planning to be thought out before it can scale to other parts of the business?
My gut is telling me the latter. I do have a lot of concerns with the level of especially with how our current process is, with how manual the address book record creation is, and that being a requirement to move forward. It is working in venting because then there was a very specific web store already created, and a lot of that work had been done, so it was designed in a way that met the needs of an older platform. So I think the ease of that transition went really well because we went from something that was just an older platform, very similar process, and just recreate, put it into a new platform. Moving forward, I think, we're starting somewhere good, but there is more work to be done when it comes to true automation and ease of doing business with.
Okay. All right. That's helpful. That makes sense. So I guess, and I'll leave this one a little bit broad, but some of the challenges that we heard from speaking with Todd and some others yesterday, at least the PSD is experiencing with Salesforce, stem from some of the account hierarchy conversations that are going on to try to tackle that. But within the portion of the Salesforce that has adopted Salesforce as a platform, are you seeing other really large data challenges that are jumping out at you, or is that primary focus on fixing the account hierarchy and then that will start to solve a lot of the larger issues?
Yeah, so we went through a huge deduplication process, and I think you spoke with Joan and the BPDS team last week, and I'm sure they were able to provide much deeper insight on that. That was a big deal. We still have some deduping to be done, or at least organization within Salesforce, but I do think I think a lot's going to be resolved with the hierarchy discussion and the account linkages, meaning not necessarily a hierarchy within a corporation trickling, building that triangular hierarchy of a company, but also the strategic linkages with partners, value-added partners that we would have to work with to do business with this other company.
Got it. Okay. All right, that makes sense. So, Jen, did you have any specific areas that you wanted to make sure that we covered while we had Colleen here? This has been really helpful for me, I think, just in trying to make some of these connections. I think the more of these conversations we have, what each one of these calls is doing, at least for me, is starting to fill in gaps where we get 80% of the story here and, the other 20% gets finished up in a conversation with somebody else. So I'm starting to feel like there's a little bit more of a connected understanding of where everything stands.
Yeah, I had a couple of things I was thinking about as Colleen was talking, and I'm not sure how deep you want to go. The first one was the sealant store, and do you know if that also needs an address book record created before we let our distributors buy from the sealant store?
It does.
It does, okay. So there's a similar process. And then the second one, we're talking about address book records, and I know we still haven't talked about the individuals at these accounts. And as we're going through kind of the life cycle of them becoming aware of Gore and those, the design conversations starting to happen with their design engineers, as that starts to transition into like an actual purchase and we're dealing with a procurement person, as those people within the account kind of change hands, is there any documentation that you've seen in Salesforce now where we have people that are creating these contacts and being specific about the role they're playing in the sale and attaching them or connecting them to the accounts?
Not documented, no. I think our contact cleanliness, the data cleanliness, is probably much to be desired. When, if someone has left and someone replaces, I don't think that replacement is always necessary. The dots are connected in the system. One point that you did bring up, Jen, that actually is, I think, an important point. We build E1 address numbers at an account level. For Cloud Craze, it is my understanding that is actually at a contact level that requires a unique sign-in. So it's not just we give an account a sign-in and anyone at that company can sign in. It is a contact level sign-in. So I would have to go in and create not a full-fledged E1 address, but a Cloud Craze part number or a Cloud Craze account number, which is a button in Salesforce. I would have to go in as a customer support to create that for every individual that would want to sign into Cloud Craze. That's the current way it is rolled out for venting and sealants.
Okay, I wonder if they have like integration with right now that's so manual. I bet there's a way to do that so it doesn't have to be with some of these other consent management. And that was my other piece was consent management, because I know we don't have opt-out or opt-in turned on within Salesforce, and that's something that is in Marketing Cloud, and it will be part of our forms. And Adam, you might be able to speak to this better than anyone else through all the forms conversations that have been happening with privacy. But I was wondering if in your sphere, Colleen, if there had been any conversations about like managing content subscriptions or consent with individuals.
There hasn't been much of that, and I'm thinking it's because of where we are in the enterprise, or where we are in the division in adopting this tool. I think, I've heard in the past when we were in Siebel and everything, how do we capture, from a marketing effort that somebody doesn't want to receive email blasts. They don't want to receive all of this type of information. I have not heard really any of that. The marketing piece and no contact or whatever piece has really not been a large focus of a broad population of our division that I have heard. I'm sure it's a concern, but I think it's one that they've kind of been sitting back to see how this is. I think it's more a system adoption issue and how can we get there.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay. I'm sure it scares you. It kind of scares me saying it too, but we used to have this rule that you couldn't send any marketing emails unless they were from ExactTarget, and I saw an email that said that people are sending emails from Salesforce because it's the only way they can send bulk emails recently, and I just am a little bit terrified that right.
that was like somebody assumed that was okay. So I think we got to address it. We got to address it quick. So, but I don't have any other questions. Andrew or Adam, did you have any follow-ups after the last piece?
I don't think that I do. Adam, anything from your end?
The only other thing that I had a question on, but it maybe just touches upon some of the early stuff that we were talking about at the top of the meeting around adoption training. It sounds like I was just curious, if folks are being directed to things like Trailhead or being directed to be more self-motivated to learn more about Salesforce. A Trailhead has ways to create these things called trail mixes, so you'd be able to compile the modules that you want your Gore associates to follow basically, and make sure that, okay, of the 500 modules on Trailhead, I've created a trail mix that has 6 or 7 of those, and I want you in your division and your roles to go through these curated training spaces so that you are aware of how the Salesforce mobile app works. You are aware of all the things that you can do with it as a marketer. Maybe can you speak a little bit around some of those training efforts and things like that so that adoption can be more readily achieved?
Absolutely, and that's been a big discussion for our Center of Excellence team. So the quick answer is, has there been a focus on trailheads? No, to the broad population. That will be changing. We are talking about developing trail mixes, making them a little bit more applicable. I think the biggest concern originally was, how do we incorporate that? We did do configuration within Gore that, if you're talking about opportunity management, our opportunity management versus out-of-the-box Salesforce opportunity management is pretty different. So we wanted to make sure things applied. But we absolutely, from a Salesforce One perspective, we're hearing it loud and clear. They need training, and we're talking about different trail mixes for that. We have successfully deployed, we've opened up reporting capabilities within PSD, and we're allowing leaders and some other associates to get the permission set, create and edit reports, because they sometimes simply want to change the filters, and if you don't have that permission set, you can't do it. In order to do that, they must complete a trailhead of training for how to do that and what that level of permission allows you to do versus what it can, open up the floodgates for as well. So then we can check on Trail Tracker to make sure that was completed and then provide a permission set once that's done. So we are starting to introduce that. From a training perspective, we're also looking at, we have a WalkMe license, which I'm super excited about, and we're going to be piloting that with opportunities and quotes. We've developed a couple WalkMes, and I think that's super well received. I love that technology. And then we also are working on tip sheets and, how-to guides that are functionally specific. That was also feedback that was loud and clear when we rolled out Salesforce. We rolled out how to click and how to get from one place to another, and that the training did not resonate with a lot of the users. So we are in a process of revamping almost all of that. We're trying to go as fast as possible, but it is in the works.
That's awesome. I think everybody has their own personal preferences as to how they like to learn things. Some people are hands-on, some like to be presented to. From a cultural standpoint, do you find that the Trailhead and self-service courseware resonates with the team, or do you feel like they prefer, a dedicated workshop that is, that afternoon hands-on and has more of a teacher or a presenter providing that information?
Huge mix.
Okay.
We do have, a lot of, and I hate to use the word because I don't want to call anyone old, and they're not. They're still very, very proficient, phenomenal sales associates, but there are just certain associates that we have that would prefer to be in a classroom, prefer to be taught hands-on, see it, play around with it as they're learning. There's definitely that, but then they hate getting out of the field, and the sales leaders don't want them to come out of the field for that purpose. So then they like to, because they don't retain it, they like to be able to go somewhere and work on it on their own. So it really is a mixture with the, with external hires that we've brought in and different demographic associates. They're definitely all about, I want to go on and do these trail mixes. I want to go on and learn more about it on my own. So I think it's gaining momentum, but it is definitely a mix.
And Jen, just a note for us to keep in mind, that Walk Me example, I think, is something that's very relevant when we're thinking about DAM and some of the other platforms that we've spoken about.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, we have the license, so I mean, I'm sure you guys are very well versed with WalkMe, but it's an overlay, so it's not just a Salesforce thing. It's any systems that we're using, we are able to pretty much set up a WalkMe.
Is that just out of curiosity? Is that an enterprise license, so that can it's not going to be something that has to get renegotiated each time? We could just potentially use that as a training plan. So you should definitely talk to Phil Marville, Marvil. I believe it is enterprise, but I did not participate in procuring that. I just left World Tour last year and said we need this with the other Div Champs. So as far as the type of license, the count, all that kind of stuff, I cannot provide those specifics. Okay. Well, I'll definitely, I took that note. We can follow up because I think it doesn't even matter what it is that we're looking at within this CX program in general as we're trying to find ways to help people adopt. I think that that's a really, really good resource to have as part of the mix, and knowing that you guys already have that internally is fantastic.
Yep, we worked on, and like I said, we've already generated, I helped them with the opportunities and the quotes, and those are going to be the pilot WalkMe experience.
Great. Awesome. Well, I don't think I have anything else. Adam, if I jumped in and cut you off, if you have anything else, feel free.
No, I think we covered off on a lot of different topics, and so I definitely appreciate the time, Colleen.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Sorry to put you under the bright lights for an hour by yourself, but thanks for hanging in there with all of us, and this was really helpful.
No problem.
Thanks,
happy to help, and if you need anything else, just let me know.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Take care.
Yep.
All right. Take care, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.